It's not hard to find Pirates fans who want to see the team fire management, along with the guy who's doing the firing for that matter. But it comes with a genuine fear of what might happen if and when they do it. That's the topic. And I brought back an old friend to help me discuss it for a little while. And that's next on Locked On Pirates.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Pirates your first listen every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And joining me, former host here on Locked On Pirates, Ethan Smith. And he's a current contributor over at Steel City Pirates on my website for the Buccos. Ethan, how the hell are you, man? It's been a while.
Pretty good. Can't complain. Was at the home opener obviously last week, and like the story you wrote, and then I kind of basically wrote the same piece. It was probably one of the weirdest baseball games I've ever been to. Like the vibe was just off, but
yeah,
we're still going to watch this team regardless, no matter what Facebook comments tell you about Paul Skeens needing to get traded already because he gave up 5 runs in a game for once. So, doing all right. Can't complain. Just waiting for this weather to eventually warm up here in sunny Johnstown, Pennsylvania.
It'd be nice if it would warm up. I mean, maybe it'll warm up the bats too.
Yeah.
So this is a special show. We normally kind of do game recaps, and then it's a little formulaic. That's not what this is going to be. It's a special episode. I really want to talk about a subject that I think is hitting people right in the face. There's been calls for the owner to sell. I don't think that's going to happen, but I do think firings are going to come. We even saw DK Pittsburgh Sports report in their Friday Insider that they have heard that Derek Shelton is not safe at all. Could be fired at any time. So that doesn't mean it's imminent, but it means it's at least being talked about, and that's not something that happens lightly in a baseball organization. So, Ethan, let's start there. If they move on from Derek Shelton, I guess the question is the team secretly good and a better manager is going to come in and everything's going to work great and he's been holding them back? Because I think both can be true. Shelton can stink and the talent can be underwhelming too.
Yeah. And there's multiple instances of this recently where certain teams that were actually in a much better position, I would say, than the Pirates are right now, fired their managers. I mean, you look at the Toronto Blue Jays, who did it not even a couple years ago, and next thing you know, they ripped off a great month following that, and then they just kind of fell back into where the Toronto Blue Jays usually are. The Philadelphia Phillies did it a couple years ago and kind of shocked everybody in terms of doing it, and it just reinvigorated the team, and I think that's kind of what you're hoping for. And to bring up another sport, I mean, you've seen 2 NBA teams in the last month fire their head coach right before the postseason to try to reignite their team. And maybe that's the mindset they have here, is they want to say, okay, if you move on from Derek Shelton, I don't know when it would be. I'm not going to sit here and project that because I have absolutely no clue. But if it did happen during the season, yeah, I mean, at least I think right away you would sense a difference. But you bring up a great point too. A lot of it is going to start looking at that talent, because once you start pointing fingers, well, if the whipping boy is not around anymore, who are you going to start blaming it on? I mean, that's really, the blame is just going to shift if nothing really changes over the course of like a long period of time, rather than those first couple days where people are going to say, I told you so. And we're going to be like, Gary, we told you Derek Shelton was the problem, after they sweep like the Athletics or something, if they did it. And then like the following week they go 3-4. And then next thing you know, it's all Tommy Pham's fault again.
It feels minimally to me like he'll get until he gets Horwitz and Gonzalez back, and you can at least say, okay, now you've at least got the horses we thought you were going to be racing with. I guess it looks like Joey Bart might be going on the IL for Henry Davis.
Yeah.
So, there's a wrinkle too. I don't think that just goes on forever and he has to have the complete unit all back together before they make a call. But I do think they're going to at least wait for a couple of those bigger pieces that he's been without for most of the season. Even so, Ben Cherington's tied himself to him, like directly, like with actual words. How does he turn around and decide now he's going to fire him? You
Yeah,
know, what does that look like?
and I think that's interesting because yeah, he's come out and publicly said like this is my guy, we're together in this. But like there's almost no instance where Ben Cherington has not mentioned Derek Shelton when he's talking about constructing this roster. So that does bring up an interesting point because how do you move on from a guy that you've basically all but married at this point? Like
Right.
you can't really split this marriage off and then all of a sudden say, "Okay, well now I'm building my team this way." When for the last 3 or 4 years, you've basically said Derek Shelton's the guy to lead this team and the roster that he's constructed. That would just feel weird because then Ben Cherington's sitting there and you're like, wait a minute, isn't this the guy that you said is supposed to do this for you? Now all of a sudden here comes another guy that's just going to magically figure it out. I mean, it's a weird dynamic going on because I mean, again, almost any time that Ben Cherington talks to anybody, Derek Shelton's name comes out of his mouth at least 3 times, at least.
Here's another way to think of this too, because you're talking about like right now, it's April. Let's just say they do something really rash and they get rid of him like middle of May. Let's just say middle of May, they're like, I've seen enough. Derek, this team should be in much better shape. All the excuses don't work. We got to move on. In the middle of May, you're not going out and poaching, coaches from other organizations.
No.
You're probably promoting Donnie Kelly. Now, what's going to be different? Because Donnie Kelly has been in lockstep making all these decisions with Derek Shelton, supposedly. So now we've got a double contradiction where the guy who has been telling Derek Shelton what to do for the most part is still here. And we're replacing Derek Shelton with a guy who was complicit in most of the decisions that were made by Derek Shelton.
Yeah.
And we're expecting it to be different.
Yeah, and to take it from another Pittsburgh sport, I feel like it's going to have the same feeling as like when Matt Canada got fired as the offensive coordinator from the Steelers in the middle of the year. Everybody kind of thought that everything was going to magically change. They were going to do all this different stuff with the offense, but you can't do that in the middle of the season. Like you said, you're not going to be able to go get like the Phillies bench coach as your manager or like the Dodgers hitting coach as your manager because they're just going to not move on from them. And more than likely, and you got to think of it this way, yeah, the Pirates could want them. Maybe they don't want the Pirates. Maybe they're fine with where they're at. I mean, you have to consider that it's a two-way street with this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And Donnie Kelly, I agree. I mean, I just don't think that much would really change as far as the approach. But maybe decision making would be the difference. I think that would be maybe the biggest difference is who is he bringing out of the bullpen and what does the lineup look like. Right. But I don't think the approach would be all that different.
Man, let's take our first break here and we'll come back. We'll talk a little bit more before I let you go, Ethan, because I know you got to get off to work.
Sounds good.
Get the supplies you need from the site made for skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. All right, welcome back to Locked On Pirates. Hey, make sure you hit that subscribe button down there because I'm going to do silly things like these impromptu live shows every once in a while, and you're not going to want to miss them. So make sure you're subscribed and hit us with a like too. Tell Ethan that you've missed him. Say hello. And Ethan, the last thing I wanted to talk about before we let you go here is the coaching. Interim was one thing. I think they'd be kind of hamstrung into going with Donnie Kelly, at least if they did this in season. But don't you think long term they probably have to look at a veteran? I think you need a coach that's been there and done that. I'm not saying it has to be somebody that's won the World Series, but it's got to be somebody that has done something with lesser talent.
Yeah, and I honestly think one of the perfect guys to look at that was Terry Francona this past
Absolutely,
offseason.
yeah.
I thought that was the guy that could be the manager to push this team over the edge. He's done a lot with a lot less talent. He has experience with a smaller market team that doesn't spend as much money, obviously being with his time in Cleveland. And he's just has the track record. I don't think the fan base would be very receptive to getting like a former player who's entering his first managerial job, you know? Like, I don't think that they would want like a Daniel Vogelbach. I know I'm just throwing a name out there. He wouldn't be a candidate at all, but I don't think that they would want something like that. I think they would want a recognizable name that when you say that's the manager of the Pittsburgh Pirates, okay, at least like people around baseball know who this is. Because I'll also be raise of hands when Derek Shelton got hired as this manager, how many people knew who he was? I mean, let's be honest. How many people really knew who Derek Shelton was in Minnesota as their hitting coach? So I think that I agree. I think you have to go out and get a Terry Francona type. Again, like you said, it doesn't have to be a guy that's a multiple World Series winner, has like a 700 winning percentage or what. Like, just get somebody, like you said, that's been there, done that, knows his way around, can run this pitching staff well, can run this bullpen well, can formulate a lineup and maybe stick with it for longer than 2 days.
Yeah.
Like something like that. Just a recognizable guy that's been there and done that.
I think the most damning thing about Derek Shelton, and I'm going to give you a chance to kind of leave on that note, what you think is the most damning thing about Derek Shelton's time here. I don't think that I can rate his win-loss total because of what he's been given and the purpose of what those early Derek Shelton, Ben Cherington teams were trying to do, which is lose, whether you want to admit it or not. So it's hard for me to look at his overall record and say, yes, that defines Derek Shelton. That's why he sucks. I think what is most damning about Derek Shelton is from 2020 on, his most consistent message has been that he wants to win within the margins, do the little things right, and get the fundamentals nailed. And he has never coached a team that has done any of those things well.
No, flat out hasn't done it. And you can't preach that. And then I think the other thing that's starting to get to people's heads too is I remember it last year during the 10-game losing streak when this podcast was like hitting record numbers because of misery. I remember he would continuously come out and say, we're just not getting lucky. The ball isn't falling our way. This isn't happening the way it should. It'll all come back. We'll regress back to the mean, which, mind you guys, it sounds like a bad thing all the time, but regressing to the mean can be both a good and a bad thing. Eventually, it just has to be on you. You're supposed to be the leader of the clubhouse. This is the stuff that you say, that was my fault. Like not taking Bednar out of the closer role sooner last year, not taking Colin Holderman out of the setup role sooner last year, maybe taking a certain guy out of the lineup. That's supposed to be on you. You look all across baseball and these managers will immediately say that was not his fault. It might have been the player's fault, like ND yesterday making that absolutely horrible throw to third base. Derek Shelton could come out and say, you know what? That's on me. We should be telling him, don't do that in that spot. Although it is ND's fault, you're supposed to be taking in all criticism. You're supposed to be doing that as the manager. And it always feels like he just projects it outward to other things that just flat out don't exist. Like, yeah, you can get unlucky in baseball. It happens all the time. But that shouldn't be the root of your problem. Like, if you're coming out every day and saying we're just getting unlucky and luck's going to go our way eventually, no, it's not. It's baseball. You could be lucky one day and be unlucky for the next 5 and then be lucky for a month. I mean, it's just how it works. And I'll end it on this too. If we could just get a version of 2023 Derek Shelton this year, this team would be great. Not great, but like it would be in a much better spot because that's the best coaching job he's had in his tenure, period.
I could argue it was the most complete team he's had too.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
that Dodgers series in 2023 or 2022, whichever one it was I felt like that was the turning point almost, and then it just never turned.
And
But,
what's funny is that's a year they lost O'Neal Cruz, which, you would think he would have struggled worse, lost probably your best hitter, at least who you thought might be. So, yeah, you're right. Good coaching job to get where he was. Poor coaching job to take almost an identical team to a lesser place,
yeah.
It's, 2023, you also got, a performance that, quite frankly, if Jack would do again, would be very welcome in this lineup, wouldn't it? So there's a lot of factors involved there, but yeah, I hear you on that.
Yeah, and I'll just leave it on this. I mean, again, I think a lot of us wanted him gone in the offseason. I preached that to the mountaintops on this very show for a while. Do I think that they're going to fire him in the season? I'm not entirely sure. I think it's more likely that he sticks around than gets fired midseason, unless they just fall completely into the cellar at this point. Like if they were
Yeah.
like 8-20 or something like that, like a complete reverse of 2 years ago, then yeah, I could see that happening. But I just don't think it lasts much longer than this. And I truly don't know how much longer Cherington lasts if things don't turn around either.
I'd have to agree. And Ethan, on that note, I'm going to take over from here and talk about Ben Cherington. And I really appreciate you stopping by and helping me out talking through Derek Shelton. Take care.
Good. Sounds good, guys. See ya.
All right, so Ethan's left me the tough work, and I will get to some of your questions that I'm seeing popping up in the chat. I just wanted to make sure that I took advantage of my limited time with Ethan today to talk about the coaching a little bit. I do think that Ben Cherington in many ways is tied to the coach. It's just very rare that the GM doesn't get an opportunity to move on from the coach. My hiccup with that really is that he tied himself to him. I think it would be really difficult to make a change at GM in the middle of the season and expect something good to happen. But I also think if you really think he's the wrong guy, you don't let him make the next draft selection, do you? And that's going to come up right around the All-Star game, and I would want to have that defined before we get there. So what if Ben Cherington is fired? I've seen some people that bring it up automatically assume that we just go right back into a full rebuild. They're going to have to trade Reynolds and Skeens and Jones and whoever else and bring in a whole bunch of new talent. Well, that's one way you could do it, I suppose. But the reason that a team like this does that is because their team gets too expensive. And they can't afford to maintain what they have, let alone bolt onto it what they have to bolt onto it to try to turn it into a success. You basically have taken it as far as you can. You don't have help coming from the minors. You know you have to do something, and everything you have is really expensive. So you can't bring in a $10 million pitcher. That's what you really need to kind of get over the hump. You're usually further away than that if you're having those kind of discussions. The Pirates are further away than that. So they have some options, though, if they were to switch GMs now. A GM doesn't have to come in here and think that they're a complete talentless void all through the organization, because they're not. They have a lot of talent. They have a lot of talent coming. They have not developed the talent well, and they have not gotten the talent to make the transition from AAA to the majors well. To be fair to the development team, we have not seen players leave here and go elsewhere and succeed an awful lot. So when like for instance, Roansy Contreras, you could claim the Pirates broke him or gave up on him too early or whatever, but he hasn't latched on anywhere. You know what I mean? Big talent. We all expected more from him. We all thought maybe Oscar Marin screwed him up, but nobody's been able to fix him. Nobody's been able to reach him. because something changed with him. And I don't think any of us really know what it is. But it's hard to blame the development team because that's really more on scouting, isn't it? There's a lot of things with the team that would have to change, I think, up and down the chain, and you're not going to get instant reactions from any of those. The GM, just like the coach, you'd probably be going with an interim GM if you were to do it mid-season. So you're probably looking at somebody that was maybe even involved in the last one, like Graves, or somebody that Cherington hired as an assistant, like Baker moves up, and he's not experienced. I think if you're going to fire the GM, it's probably going to be at the end of the season. I think, in other words, I'm telling you, I think Ben Cherington's going to make another draft pick. And I think Ben Cherington's going to go through another deadline, making moves or not making moves, whichever the case may be. But the team is not where it needs to be offensively. So there is necessary heat on Ben Cherington. I don't think it has to go into a full rebuild, though. So let's kind of talk about what that landscape of this team might be. You know, let's kind of try to examine why it would be and why it wouldn't be. All right, welcome back to Locked On Pirates. Last segment here. Ben Cherington. Let's pretend he's being fired. A new GM's going to come in, fire in his belly. He's still got Bob Nutting as his owner, so it's not like he's going to get handed $50 million with which he can go out and do whatever he wants and do whatever he likes to the team. If you're a GM that thinks the only way out of the hole that you're in here is to spend money, you're probably not getting hired here. So let's talk about that issue first. Hire a new GM. Bob Nutting's still doing the hiring. I'm not even going to discuss Travis Williams, but he's involved in it and probably shouldn't be either. We should probably take that firing discussion up to his level. Either way, Bob Nutting is the policy setter, the budget setter, and the final decision maker on who hires this GM. Bob doesn't know baseball, and he doesn't need to. And he's hired somebody to be his team president that doesn't know baseball, and he does need to. So I think they're going to have to make a change there as well. You bring in a new GM regardless. He's going to have his own ideas on what to do. He's going to look around the team. He's going to decide, hey, I need more power. Here's the assets I do have. Some of it's going to be on the mound, like we have all discussed all offseason. And he's probably going to pick somebody to move. I don't think it's going to be Paul Skeens, not if it's this early. You've still got like 4 or 5 years left with Paul Skeens. You'd be insane to think that you can't put something around him to make it work. But you could see them moving on from somebody like a Jared Jones, who's maybe got a little bit more of a foot in the sand up here, and people know what he is, and they expect him to be a major leaguer. That carries some value along with all that control. You could move somebody like him for some bats that are close, like Kobe Mayo in Baltimore, or a couple guys like that. Things we talked about in the offseason that Ben Cherington should consider, like being bold to try to fill out the side of his team that didn't develop as quickly. When you have an imbalanced development system that creates mostly pitching and doesn't create enough hitting, stands to reason that you should use some of that overflow pitching to get some hitting. These are all basic concepts. They're easier said than done, of course, and you got to go out and pull the trades off and find willing partners and all that. But you would think another GM would probably come in and have an idea a lot like that. I don't think we're looking at a situation where somebody would feel compelled, just given the starting pitching that's already here and coming. I don't think you'd find somebody that's compelled to go out there and think they have to blow it up, because you have the makings here of a really good starting rotation for the next half decade. That's a start most GMs don't get, because most GMs that have built that don't get fired unless you look at the other side of the ball. Okay? So you need somebody that is experienced at identifying, selecting, and making the most of offensive talent. That could be an assistant from some place that has kind of become a factory for that sort of thing. Um, Not unlike it would have been poaching the guy from Milwaukee a couple years ago. That would have been a great move if they were able to pull it off. You might want to look at somebody like the Padres that continue to pop out a decent farm system even as they trade off the top layer of it over and over and over again. You're going to want to look at teams like that that are really producing minor league talent. The Boston Red Sox are really doing very good with it. So look at some teams like that, see if you can poach something from them and hire a new GM. I think you're going to get somebody that feels like they can work with what's here. If you bring in a few bats and surround it with this pitching, it's really not as far away as we're thinking. It's just not. You couple that with a coach that you feel does better with the talent he's been given. Yeah, somebody that makes better decisions than this one. Somebody that can recognize, like, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa shouldn't be playing shortstop in the major leagues. That's the sort of stuff that I'm talking about. Somebody that recognizes that leaving a lineup intact, at least in the shell form, is a good idea for players and their psyche and how they play off of each other in a lineup. Somebody that wants to make sure people aren't getting so derailed that they can't do it anymore. I don't want to be already looking forward to next year. We have a long season here. We're going to talk about baseball. It's going to be something all year. I don't really care what they do with the management team in the season. I'm just saying any changes they make probably aren't going to affect this season all that much. I think you're still going to have to go through the paces with these guys. Even if they fire them, I don't know that I believe, short of an entire regime change in that dugout, that you really shake that room up. You know, it's not like Donnie Kelly's going to start flipping tables or something tomorrow. That's probably not in his DNA either. So I just think that minimal benefits will come this year. So that's why I'm focusing more on 2026 for when you should start seeing changes with a new GM coming in. I can't see too many paths that would lead me to total rebuild. That pitching staff is just too good. The closest I can get is you might find a GM that thinks, okay, what's a way I can shed some salary and get more talent in here where I need it? And instead of trading someone like Jared Jones that's cheap, which would bring back better players, you might send somebody out who's qualified, good, steady, and healthy all the time, like Mitch Keller, who you're going to be paying probably more than the Pirates are comfortable with, and expect that you're going to replace him with those young, controllable arms that are coming up, along with what Bailey faltered and who other free agents you get like Heaney along the way. You can cobble together a pretty good starting rotation, bring back some offensive talent for somebody like Keller, and with that contract, it's reasonable. With his track record, it's a reasonable rate of pay. Any team in the league, short of like the Dodgers, who are going to be able to plop him in at their 3 or 4 of their starting rotation and feel really, really good about that selection. I think you could really get some good stuff for him, depending on who you make the trade with. That's what I think a different GM would think. I think Ben Cherington probably more conservative than that. I think he would probably continue to just think he's going to grow it internally and that the patience well is endless. Well, I don't think the patience well is endless. It certainly isn't with the fans. And while you're not going to like Bob Nutting whether he fires the GM or not, Bob Nutting doesn't like to pay money to people who aren't doing a good job either. In fact, he paid money to get rid of the last crew. So maybe on this, I'm not gonna question him all that much. I think he probably will do the right thing when he has to, at least as far as firing these guys go. If nothing happens. What do I have to see, though, to change my mind on Derek Shelton this year? I got to be honest with you. I kind of let this ship sail last year. I wouldn't have brought him back. And I made that very clear. I wouldn't have brought him back last year. I've accepted that he's here. That doesn't make me happy, but I've accepted that he's here. What I would need to see from him for me to completely reverse my opinion on whether he should be or shouldn't be the coach of the Pittsburgh Pirates, I would need him to kind of change the way he thinks about things. I would need to see him more anxious to use his youth when it gets called up. I'd need to see him not be so predictable about where he will put said youth in the lineup when he decides to use them. I would have more faith in him if he could recognize that somebody can't handle a position and stops asking them to play it when you have other options. I would change my mind on him if I saw anybody improve from AAA to the majors that isn't on the mound, because I don't see that. And if you're a coach or the leader of a coaching staff and you've been someplace for going on 6 years now, and you can't point to a player that has gone from prospect to counted on good player in your time, I guess I would give you O'Neal Cruz, although it's taken a long time, and I think there's a lot of people that still think there's some holes in his game that shouldn't be there, right? I mean, maybe the coaching isn't being effective with it. It's really hard for me to get on board and think that I'm going to change my opinion on him. I try to be really open-minded, but I just think the stink is too great to wash off at this point. And even a can of tomato juice, he's still going to smell like losses. And I think the room's gotten too comfortable with losing, because when you hire a coach and leave him go for that long as doing nothing but losing, how could everyone in the room not absorb that that's okay? I know they say the right things, but then they look across the locker room and there's Derek Shelton. He's never won, and he's still here. Where's that pressure to win? Where's that example of who gets moved on from because it's not good enough? Connor Joe? All in all, I think, guys, if they move on from the GM and the coach, I don't think this whole thing resets. This was never a 5-year plan, at least not on the record. And I don't think that the next one would come in and sell you a 5-year plan. I think if Bob makes a change, it's because Bob thinks that the product on the field could be and should be better now, and he's given him enough to make it better now. Now, Bob can be wrong on that, and maybe his "I've given you enough" is that there's $5 million unspent sitting somewhere. But if he makes a change, it's because he thinks a new GM and coach can make significant impact quickly. It's time to win. They've all been saying it. And maybe the way that Bob shows that he believes it is that he's not going to accept it anymore. That's what you have to hope for. Of course, the other side of this is we're fans. We could just hope that everything turns around. And come August, we're talking about like how awesome everybody performed and what a great job coaching Derek Shelton did and how wonderful those pickups were that Ben Cherington made at the deadline. And boy, he gave away nothing and got a whole bunch back. I can dream, right? I mean, the Wizard of Oz is real to a lot of you. So it could get better. It just hasn't. And I think they're going to have to make a change one way or another as this season winds down or goes on. I think it would be coach first, GM second, not a national disaster no matter what. Thank you for making Locked On Pirates your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night every game, every night, all season long. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And thank you guys for joining me for this special live episode. I will try to do one of these as often as I can. Appreciate your contributions.